Riot Chapter 9. Brian looked through the new shirts, jeans, and sweatshirts in his closet, deciding what to wear for the first day of school tomorrow. Usually it mattered, but his conversation with the sheriff still chilled him. What was Sheriff Hunter getting at? How much did he know? Maybe when the police car had passed through the intersection, the officers had seen Dad's truck and followed them. Maybe they got the license number down. Was the sheriff trying to make him confess? Brian heard the truck engine turn off in the garage. The door opened to the kitchen. He heard the murmur of his parents' voice. "Bri," Dad called. Brian stepped over a pile of Josh's new Lego blocks and walked down the hallway to the kitchen. "Yeah?" Dad held up a newspaper. "Front page," he said. "Isn't that something?" Mom said, pushing her short hair behind her ears. "I'm really proud of him." Dad needed a shave. He was wet, probably from standing out in the rain on the picket line. He tapped the black and white picture, filling up the top quarter of the paper, and read the headline. "Heroic Rescue at City Beach." Mom smiled. Josh and Alyssa raced up the stairs from the basement. "Dad," Josh called, "you're home." "Dad," Alyssa echoed, "you're home." They wrapped their arms around Dad's waist. He set down the paper and squeezed them both around their shoulders. "Your brother's a hero," Mom said, smiling. She held up the paper. "Wow," exclaimed Alyssa, shaking her fine blonde hair back and forth. She tugged at Brian's jeans and looked up at him. "I didn't know you were so famous," she added seriously. "Wait till I tell Alex," Josh said. "He won't believe it." "It would have to be a rat," Dad said icily. Brian winced. "I didn't know him, Dad," he shrugged. "He was just a kid." "Oh, for heaven's sakes," Mom snapped, her eyes fiery. "Josh and Alyssa, you two run back downstairs and watch TV. Supper will be ready in a few minutes." Alyssa put up her lip. "But I don't—" "Right now," Mom ordered, placing her hands on the twins' heads. She turned them in the direction of the basement, and they trotted down the carpeted stairs. Mom put her hands on her hips. "Are you serious? A boy was drowning, and— What do you mean? You think Brian should have let him drown?" she glared. "No, but he can't be crossing lines," Dad insisted, his voice sharp. Brian cringed. If pulling Cam from the water meant crossing lines, then he was really confused. With his forefinger, Dad tapped the newspaper lying on the counter. Thump, thump, thump. "Stay away from them, Bri. There's trouble brewing. I don't want you to get hurt." Mom's face contorted, tears filling her eyes. "Stan," she said, "why don't you give me a hand in the kitchen? You and I can talk. It might help you get your mind off the strike for a while." Dad looked in Mom's direction, but he seemed to be looking right past her. He shook his head. "Sorry, I can't," he said. "I have to get back." "But you just got home," she pleaded. "School starts tomorrow, and I have a lot to get everyone ready. Like I said, I better get back." His jaw muscles tightened, and he stepped out to the garage, and he was gone. Brian picked up the newspaper lying on the counter and settled onto a stool. In the picture, he was standing by while the lifeguard gave mouth-to-mouth to Cam. The caption read, "Blue Ash Youth Brian Grant, 12, stands aside after rescuing Cameron Redding, 14, from Rainy Lake. Sunday afternoon. Lifeguard Leah Cole reviving Redding through mouth-to-mouth resuscitation." Brian wondered what Cam thought about the picture. At least the lifeguard was cute. In the background, Chelsea stood with her arms crossed, skin wet, looking on intently. Brian couldn't take his eyes off her. After a few minutes, Mom put her hands on Brian's shoulders. "I don't know your father right now," she said, her voice soft and controlled. Even when she was angry, she had a way of reining in her feelings. "This labor dispute is dividing more than a union against non-union," she gripped his shoulders. "It's splitting families like ours up right down the middle. I hate it. I absolutely hate it." She rose, poured 2 blue glasses full of orange juice, and then sat back down. "Here," she said, lifting her glass and passing the other to Brian. "Bottoms up." Brian lifted the glass to his lips and drained it. "Mom, when your teachers' union went on strike last year," he said, "it was a lot different, wasn't it?" Mom sat down beside him on a stool and combed her hair with her fingers. "We didn't have other teachers coming in and taking our positions. That would have made teachers angry. As it was, it just meant closing the classrooms for a few weeks. By striking together, we had more power to get the pay we deserve as professionals." Brian understood. He knew his mom worked hard at her job. Gretzky appeared, sat down next to Brian's foot, and looked up with his black button nose. Brian scratched the top of his head. "Dad's strike is different," she continued. "It's complicated. Rather than walking off a job, they didn't get the job. They're protesting that the Gold Portage chose a non-union company to build the new project. It's an unofficial strike, not sanctioned by the union. That's why it's called a wildcat strike." "Mom," Brian said, trying to keep his voice casual, "have you heard about the car windows getting bashed in around town and things like that?" He nodded. He needed to talk about what he knew without coming right out and telling it. "Yes," she nodded. "I hate it." It's one thing to go on strike and wave picket signs. It's another thing entirely to take the law in your own hands and start destroying property and threaten people. She rested her elbows on the counter. Just take a look in the paper. There are a lot of columns of vandalism reports every night. She paused. He remembered the sheriff's stare and the way he seemed to know more than he said. He couldn't meet his mom's eyes. Your father doesn't hear a word I say lately. The only people he listens to these days are his buddies at the strike site. I'm afraid he's going to completely stop thinking for himself. He did that once when he was in hockey, and it cost him. Brian ran his finger around the rim of his empty glass. What do you mean? His senior year. The year his team went to state. He got so into the competition that he got carried away on the ice. Has he never mentioned it? Brian shook his head. He got into a bad fight in the first period with a player from the other team and had to sit out the rest of the game. His team really needed him. By getting into the fight, he actually hurt his team. He was their best scorer. You were a cheerleader at the game? Brian asked. He'd seen plenty of Mom's old cheerleading photos. She was always on the top of the pyramid. Mom nodded. And they lost. 6-4, she said. If your father hadn't been so hot-headed and landed himself in the penalty box, they might have won. She closed her eyes and sighed. Sometimes he doesn't use any common sense. What would she say if she knew about the stones Brian and I had tossed at the guardhouse, or the tax that he'd dropped, even if it was accidentally? He'd always trusted his parents to know right from wrong. But what happened when they had completely opposite ideas? Right wasn't as clear as he once thought. The air was suddenly filled with a putrid smell. Mom, Brian said. Her eyes flashed. She jumped up to lift the smoking pot from the stove burner. Not again, she moaned. Brian knew the smell all too well. It was the smell of burnt peas permanently bonded to the bottom of the pan.